This is GovExec Daily, where we bring you the federal stories that really matter. It's March 9th, 2021. I'm Rob Shriver. When President Joe Biden's administration took over in January, they inherited low morale and a set of difficult policies regarding the federal workforce. While Biden signed a series of executive orders during his first week to overturn Donald Trump's workforce policies, the work is just beginning to reestablish trust with public servants and the millions of federal employees. As part of Government Executive Media Group's The New Agenda event recently, GovExec senior correspondent Eric Katz interviewed Rob Shriver, who is Associate Director for Employee Services at the Office of Personnel Management. After a short message, you'll hear Eric's interview with Shriver on the role of OPM during the Biden era and the future of the civil service. Myths about 5G abound across the public sector. Join Defense One, NextGov, and Route 50 to get the facts, uncover the fiction, and investigate the line between what's real and what's not when it comes to 5G. On March 9th, tune in to the 5G Futures virtual event to learn about the social, geopolitical, and technological implications of 5G. Visit nextgov.com/events for more information and get ready to decipher fact from fiction.
I'm Eric Katz, Senior Correspondent at Government Executive. I'm excited to begin today's Future of Civil Service discussion. Joining me today for this important conversation is Rob Shriver, Associate Director for Employee Services at the Office of Personnel Management. Rob, thanks a lot for making the time to be with me today. So I wanted to sort of set the scene a little bit of what you're walking into here at OPM. Anyone who's read our coverage over the last several years is probably familiar with the situation, I guess, of what it's been like at OPM recently. Your workforce obviously is very familiar with this, but from essentially being pegged for elimination entirely, and a lot of I guess what was disruptive and at times antagonistic process with regards to OPM from the previous administration, and now a completely different tone with the Biden administration. I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit about what is the state of OPM, what's the workforce feeling like, and how have you tried to manage that, in your first few weeks?
Well, thanks, Eric. I'm really happy to be here today to be talking about OPM, and I am so encouraged by what I see at the agency in my first few weeks on the job. This is my second time at OPM. I served during President Obama's administration from 2009 to 14, and now I'm back. And in the years that I was away, OPM has been through a lot, from the cyber breach to the discussions about merging with GSA that you mentioned. And it's been a tough go for the agency. What I am so happy to see is that the resiliency of the agency that I came to know in my first time there is ever present. OPM has a workforce that is very dedicated to the mission of the agency. They work hard to promote the merit system principles. They work hard to provide expert HR guidance, across the federal government. They work hard to engage with key stakeholder groups, from unions to vets groups to colleges and universities, all different types of stakeholder groups that are important to HR in the federal government. So yes, a lot of people have left over the years. We have staffing shortages. There have been budgetary challenges. All those things are there and they're real. But the OPM that I came back to is the OPM that I love. It's ready to go. We have people that just want to be, given the support and the direction to do good things for government. That's what they're all about. And frankly, there's a real excitement at the agency. We're a little tired. Things have been busy since January 20th. People have been working really hard, but they want to. That's all that they want to do is, put their skills and abilities to the important issues that the government's facing. And I'm really happy to be back and happy to say that that's what I'm seeing from the workforce today.
Were there conversations around this? Were there concerted efforts to sort of be able to wrap your heads around what the challenges were? I mean, it sounds like you had a good grasp of where the workforce is at and what they're looking to, and you've expressed optimism about how excited they are to and mission driven they are. So how did you come to gain that understanding?
So it comes from the top. I think President Biden issued an executive order on day 3 of his administration, EO 14003, and I think either the first or second line is that the career civil service is the backbone of the government. Mm-hmm. That's the view of the Biden administration, and it's a view that those of us who are working in it and at OPM are carrying through to the workforce. So certainly, I think the group of leaders who have come into OPM all share a commitment to supporting and empowering the career civil servants, relying on their expertise. Our intention in coming in as leaders in the Biden administration is to tap into that, support it, as I said, provide appropriate policy direction, help identify what the priorities are. But really, it has been a conscious effort to show the workers how much we appreciate them, how much the Biden administration appreciates them, and that this is a new day indeed. It's a day of empowerment, of respect, and of real partnership and collaboration with the career civil servants who again are the backbone of the government.
So you brought up a couple of interesting things there. You mentioned the EO. You mentioned some of the Biden administration priorities. What role does OPM play in enacting those things? I want to hear about the executive order, but even also more broadly, in terms of the federal workforce agenda and other priorities that can sort of funnel their way into the federal workforce and OPM's realm. How do you see OPM influencing that or playing a part in those priorities?
So OPM is really focused on reemerging as a leader in this space. We are the government's HR advisor. We set government-wide HR policy. We support agencies and support the workforce on a daily basis. We are really pleased to see that, again, in his first week in office, President Biden issued a federal workforce executive order, and that executive order placed OPM in the leadership role to implement the policies of the executive order and really lead federal workforce policy across government. Of course, OPM can't do that alone. We bring a collaborative mindset to the job. First and foremost, our partnership with OMB is critical, and we've been working very closely with the new leadership that's been coming on board there on workforce policy issues. We have reinstituted the Chief Human Capital Officers Council and been having regular meetings with them, and also have had engagement with agency Chief Human Capital Officers outside of the formal meetings. We have been engaging with the federal labor unions, both in a group setting and in individual meetings. We are kind of that connective tissue throughout the government. From what I'm seeing so far, there seems to be a real interest in having OPM re-engage in that leadership role. And we're really excited to be doing that again in partnership with the stakeholders and the other important government agencies.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of that has been demonstrated already. You know, if some of the things that have come out from the administration have shown that there's a little bit more forward leaning and a different tone coming out of OPM than we've seen. So I'm curious is there any more detail you could give or background, if, for those who maybe aren't familiar with the executive order that you've referenced a couple times now, in terms of what that's trying to accomplish, if you have any insight into how that came about, and where you see, I know there's a task force that's meeting, and where you see that going in terms of OPM's role and how that will influence the work that you all are doing.
So it's really exciting that, as I mentioned, President Biden on day 3 of his administration issued an executive order on the federal workforce. And really, I think the policy intent of that is clear. The president is looking to reset federal labor relations across the government. One of the things that it did right out of the gate was eliminate the so-called Schedule F authority. This was a new hiring authority that the Trump administration put into place in its waning days. And under that authority, there would have been a lot more ability to either hire or remove employees without following the regular procedures. And while that may not sound like a big deal, the fact of the matter is that the procedures that are in place around hiring and firing help preserve the federal civil service as a nonpartisan professional institution. So, in my opinion, being able to eliminate that authority on day 3 was really important to setting the tone for this administration's priorities of supporting and building up a professional, nonpartisan civil service. The other things that the executive order did was tackle some executive orders that were issued during the Trump administration that were viewed as very anti-employee and anti-union. Those executive orders were viewed as really, toxic to the federal unions and employees. So President Biden took care of those in this executive order as well, rescinding those executive orders. And then he also asked agencies to review all of the policies that they may have in place that were intended to implement those executive orders and take quick action to undo those. And then went beyond and included 2 additional directions. One was that agencies would begin to negotiate with unions over a broader set of topics. There are a range of topics in the federal labor statute they're called permissive subjects of bargaining, and basically agencies have the discretion normally to decide whether or not to bargain over those. President Biden told agencies that they did have to bargain over those topics. So that was an important signal to the unions about how much this administration is going to value their input on important workplace matters, from the very beginning. And then lastly, President Biden, in this executive order, directed OPM to do a report on federal workers who are earning less than the $15 per hour minimum wage. So we're assessing the landscape there, evaluating who is affected by that, and we'll be issuing a report in the coming months on that topic as well.
That report is something that's that you all are working on. Is there anything else that OPM will play a role in going forward in terms of? I'm thinking about the labor management relations. I know you have, I believe, a labor background as well, in addition to your experience at OPM. What role does OPM play there? And how do you see that playing out? I know you mentioned there's going to be a sort of a broader scope of negotiable things going forward.
OPM will be a leader in this administration in the federal labor relations space. My team has well-established relationships with both agency labor relations staff and federal employee union leadership from around the country. That's a core function that we perform. We will be a leading voice on implementation of the president's labor agenda for the federal workforce. We are a problem solver. We're a point of escalation. If there are questions about implementing the president's policy, agencies and unions come to OPM to look for assistance. If there are disputes about implementation of the policy, again, agencies and unions come to OPM as a point of escalation, and we try to work together with them in order to resolve those disputes in a way that best advances President Biden's agenda. I do want to emphasize the close partnership that we have with OMB on federal labor relations. I'm really excited about the team that is coming into place at OMB. We've been working closely with them from the very beginning. You mentioned also the task force. So another executive order that President Biden issued set up the Safer U.S. Government Task Force, which is tied closely to the COVID-19 pandemic. OPM is playing a major role in supporting that task force, working closely with both OMB and GSA. That we did a briefing in the first week of February with the national unions on the work that task force was doing. There's been guidance that the task force has issued about the mask mandate and other matters related to COVID in the federal government. So I'm really pleased with the administration's vision of OPM playing a leading role in these important areas for federal workers.
Well, that will certainly be a big shift from what we've seen over the last few years. I want to shift gears here because you gave me a good segue on the pandemic. That's obviously created certain challenges, in the federal government, and probably, and certainly for all human resources and management type and large organizations all over the country and all over the world. What can you point to anything yet? I mean, is it too soon to say that there's been any lessons learned in terms of how that has affected, for example, hiring or recruiting, the things that you might want to, as sort of like you said, the connective tissue, pass that along to other agencies or help provide some sort of relief to agencies as they sort through all of this?
So that's a great question, Eric, and it's one of the things that I am really interested in working on here during my time at OPM. I have had the first time experience of joining a new job virtually. Like when I started at OPM on February 1st, there was no going into headquarters. There was no walking around and meeting my team. It's been 100% virtual. And that's a different experience for me, and one that many people have had over the last almost a year now. And I think there is a lot for us to learn about what happened there. There's some unpacking to do because your question about recruiting and hiring, for example, I think that in the past administration, there wasn't as much of a priority on filling vacancies or adding new employees to the roles. So it's hard to tell, like right now, how much of the experience during the pandemic was driven by the pandemic itself or by a management philosophy that was previously in place. So that is certainly something that we're digging into. We do have recruitment efforts that have continued. We've been running programs like the Presidential Management Fellows Program, which is a prestigious program that folks that are graduating from master's degree programs or higher education programs can apply to be in this program and go through a 2-year rotation and ultimately wind up in government jobs. So programs like that have continued to run virtually. And I think there is a whole lot to be learned. And I think
so. You mentioned the virtual setting that we're in now. Is there any end in sight to that? I mean, I assume OPM. I mean, I know OPM is probably in conversations with OMB and GSA and sorting that out. As I understood in the previous administration, it was sort of a regional approach wherever it seemed safe. Maybe employees would be recalled. What's the latest there? Is there anything that you can speak to on that?
So the consistent messaging from across the administration is that safety comes first. Safety for federal employees, for contractors, for the public that we serve. Safety is the driving factor. I think these are the issues that the Safer U.S. Government Task Force is going to be wrestling with. So I think it's fantastic that the president set up that task force. Agencies are coming up with their own COVID plans as part of that task force process. And I think there is more work to be done here. And again, we are working with GSA and with OMB to support the task force in that effort.
Okay. Now I know I'm not going to ask you to make any new policy from our virtual stage here, but just to be a little bit speculative. Let's say 6 months, a year from now, we're back to a sort of normal, whatever the new normal looks like, after this sort of immediate crisis has been mitigated. Do you foresee that maybe some of what we have a sort of proof of concept here in terms of what telework looks like in the federal government, and maybe some of that could stick around? Not that it will be forever virtual, but just that maybe there's more flexibility, or it's just a little bit less of a rigid system than we've seen in years past.
So, Eric, I think that we have an opportunity here to really dig into this issue in a way that it hasn't been done before. We now have experiences and data from across the government, private sector, state governments, about what it's been like over the last year, what the impact has been on productivity, on worker satisfaction. I think there is really an opportunity here to dig in. And I think it's really important for OPM to make sure that we are out of the DC bubble, out of the federal government bubble, and reaching out broadly. We have the ability to convene stakeholders to talk to these issues. I am enthusiastic that that myself and that OPM, that we have an opportunity to be part of that conversation, and we are going to be, and we already are, looking into this, thinking about not only what it's going to be like to return to the office and when, but what's the future of government work look like.
I want to give you the last word here. You mentioned the day 3, right in the first week of this administration, there was an emphasis on federal employees and calling the executive order calling federal workforce the backbone of the nation. What message do you think that sends to 2 million civil servants in government, and what message do you have from OPM's perspective about sort of delivering on that message?
So I think the message is loud and clear. We place an incredibly high value on the career civil service. We respect the work that you do every day for the American people. We respect the commitment that you have to your mission, the sincerity with which you approach your job day to day. It is one of the great institutions that we have in this democracy. And the message that you're going to be hearing from everywhere in the administration is that We are here to support you, to value you, to treat you with dignity and respect. And we're going to do this together. We face immense challenges, and I can't wait to meet more of you across the country and hear about the wonderful things that you're doing every day, because America needs to know what a huge value you provide. And I just thank you. And I thank you, Eric and GovExec, for the opportunity to get to speak to these issues, which are near and dear to my heart. So.
Thanks for listening to GovExec Daily. Our show was produced by Adam Butler. I want to thank Eric Katz for interviewing Rob Shriver, Associate Director for Employee Services at the Office of Personnel Management, on the program today. Our music is the song Signals by Catfish Dancing. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. You can email us any feedback at podcast@govexec.com or hit us up on Twitter @GovExec. We'd love to hear from you. We'll talk to you later.